Yeah, I worked for Ohio State Extension and Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic for 25 years. So Curtis and I knew each other way back then. Today I'm going to talk about just things to consider when you start out keeping bees. And I am going to have to talk pretty fast to get through this slide. So people keep bees for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people, they just want to help the bees. Some people do it because they want to make some money. They want to either pollinate their own crops or rent the hives for pollination. Some people, you have the land and you need that CAUV credit, so you need a couple hives on there. Selling or using your own honey, beeswax, etc. Learning about bee behavior, that's why I started, because I've always been fascinated with honeybees. Believe it or not, working in a hive is very relaxing, because you forget about everything else. So it is relaxing. There is a very strong camaraderie among beekeepers. We all kind of help each other. And, a little bit of added income, which I'll talk about. So you become an expert in everything. You become a pretty decent marketer. You learn about epidemiology and veterinary science. You become a chemist because you're going to have to be treating your bees with products. You become all your friends' favorite bee expert. You become a botanist and a biologist because you need to know what plants are around so your bees are healthiest. Apitherapist, it's bee sting therapy. You're going to become your own little patient. And a cook and a queen breeder. So a lot of different things that you become an instant expert at. This is one hobby that the whole family can be involved in. And I strongly recommend that if you do want to go into beekeeping that you get your young children involved in it because they're just naturals. They're very good at it. So beekeeping, honeybees are important for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, they're important for pollination. That's number one. Their estimated value for all the pollination they do is worth $15 billion of our U.S. economy each year. They're collecting pollen and honey. No other insect provides all this food. And no other insect produces something that we call to our dear loved ones as honey. They produce royal jelly, which people take as like a nutrient supplement. They make propolis, which is like a glue. That's like the shellac that we use on our boats. Apitherapy, people take both the pollen and the propolis and the honey for health reasons. And then just the insight into animal behavior. Believe it or not, bees like caffeine too. They have learned that they'll go to the coffee flower, and they get a buzz from the caffeine that's in the flower. And then they go back and tell all their sisters, and they all go, and they all get a buzz. So we learn a lot from honeybees. And they're very important for pollination. So as you know, almonds are 100% dependent on honeybees for pollination. No other insect does it as efficiently as honeybees do. Both the citrus and apples are both almost 100% dependent on apples, and almonds are almost 100% dependent on honeybees for pollination. To get our seeds, our broccoli seeds and our carrot seeds, sunflowers, they're 90% dependent on honeybees. So we have a lot of native bees, but they're not as efficient. Honeybees will go to 45 flowers, mixing pollen from 45 different flowers before they go back to the colony. So that's far more efficient than our native bees. So I want to talk about what you need to consider if you're going to go into beekeeping. And one is the startup costs, which I'll go into in more detail. There's a learning curve. It takes about 3 years to really figure it out. If you have a basic understanding of bee biology or insect biology, which you probably do here, you have a huge advantage over a lot of people trying to keep bees. But it takes 3 years before your bees start to survive and you really understand how bees work. And it's interesting because each colony has a different personality and different needs. They're like cats. They're all different. So what applies to one hive may not apply to any of your other hives. So that's why there's more books, other than the Bible, there's more books on beekeeping than any other topic, because beekeeping is so diverse and so interesting, but so diverse. Proper placement of the colonies, I'll talk about that in time management. So startup costs, you have your bee boxes, your hive equipment. You're going to want to get at least a veil. So I inspect bees all over the state. rarely do I ever get stung. Once in a while I get into a really mean colony and I'll get stung 20, 30 times. But most of the time when I'm going around the state, I don't get stung. So, and I sweat, in all that heavy clothes. So I wear a jacket and jeans and plastic disposable gloves for sanitation. I don't wear all that stuff. And for my own bees, I might wear a jacket. I always wear a veil because I swell if I get stung. But I don't wear all that other stuff. But, new beekeepers might want to get a suit. It's a state law in Ohio to register your apiary. Just like for farm animals or Christmas trees or nurseries, any kind of a livestock or animal that can, or plant that can spread diseases has to be registered so that the state can alert you if there's any kind of a problem or disease update. So that's the best deal in town is $5 for a yard of beehives. And then pest and disease management is becoming more expensive all the time. So Modern Hive consists of bee boxes with frames inside, which I have pictures of. The bees fill those frames out. You can pull the frame out, look at it. You can rearrange them if you need to, put it back in. As the season progresses, you add boxes for honey storage. And then sometime around in August, we take those honey supers off, spin them, and store them for the winter. So you want to condense those hive boxes, basically 2 or 3 at the most for the winter, so that they can get around to all, find that honey. If you have a whole stack of boxes, 1, they can't keep that area warm in the wintertime, and 2, they can't find the honey. So you want to keep it compact as possible so they can find that honey. So now we're to the point now where bees can be kept alive, hopefully year after year after year. So just a picture showing, of the hive. We have our outer cover and our inner cover. The supers are where the honey is stored up on top. Then the brood chambers, that's where the queen stays to lay eggs. That's just a general outline of it. Other tools, you're going to want a smoker. We use a smoker. It kind of masks the alarm pheromone so the bees can't smell that, so they're less disturbed. It also makes the bees want to eat all their honey. So they're fat and heavy and they can't fly as well, so you don't get stung as much. Duct tape, we all have our own, roll of duct tape to heal up the corners and such. Ouch kit you might want is basically just meat tenderizer. So if you get stung, put a little A1 steak sauce or just a dry meat tenderizer. It takes that sting away. It doesn't hurt as much. It's things to scrub your tools with. And then for a grand total, you can go all out. There's all kinds of companies who are more than willing to sell you stuff. So, $500 to $800 is probably a minimum. If you want to, really get into beekeeping, they're more than happy to take your money for more stuff. So, but you want to be able to inspect your combs, pull those frames out. That's a good, healthy frame of comb there, even though it's kind of pixelated. Here's a better close-up. So this is all capped brood. That's all the, basically bee larvae that have now pupated. The honey is going to be up in that center area up on top. The open brood that they're feeding is going to be up in there. The honey is back in these corners. If I stay out of the way, you can actually see my arrows. The honey is up in the corners. And then you see like a band that goes kind of horizontally between the honey and the capped brood. That's where the pollen is. So in every frame where there's brood, the worker bees are going to go from the honey to the pollen to the open brood to feed them. So they don't have to go very far. So that's a typical healthy frame of brood right there. And I'm showing you that so you can see what the sick ones look like. These are all the problems that affect bees. So weather, if we have a cool, wet spring, bees don't fly. They can't fly when it's cold and wet. They stay inside and they're going to eat their honey if it's warm. Monoculture, poor nutrition, it kind of all goes together. If we have acres and acres of farmland, bees don't get any nutrition from either corn or soybeans. They will pollinate it. They can increase the yield of soybeans up to 20%, but there's no nutritional quality of either corn or soybeans. So if you're up in the northwest corner where there's nothing but, corn and soybeans right up to the road, you're going to have to, first you're going to want to have to supplemental feed them, but 2, you're going to have to find some places where there's a little bit of wildflower, feed these bees, or they'll basically suffer from malnutrition, which leads to other problems. Varroa mites, that's our number one pest, which I'll talk about more. The varroa mites vector viruses. So, if we're run down and we're, not feeling well, we're not eating well, we're more susceptible to getting colds. It's the same thing with the bee. They get colds too. We have no cure for the viruses. So once they get a virus, you can try to keep them fed and all, but there's no way to stop those viruses. They get all kinds of other diseases. They have a few pests as well. Moving the bees, has been done for generations, and it is stressful on the bees. One day they're up in Paulding, Ohio. The next morning they're down in California. So, it is stressful for them. Pesticides and residue in the hive, we use all kinds of varroicides to control the varroa mites. Actually, when the USDA looks at the residue in beehives, they find more from the products that we use than they find from farm chemicals. But we still have to work together to try to, work with the beekeeper, work with the farmer, so that we're not, adding more chemicals to their diet. Beekeeper experience, again, it takes about 3 years to really figure out how to keep these bees alive. So, it's kind of challenging. And then genetics, we have like Dalmatian bees now. We don't have the diversity of genetics that we used to have. So it's a little bit harder to keep them alive. This is just showing data going back to 1940. Ohio, we used to have 330 colonies back then. The varroa mite showed up in 1986, and you can see the number of colonies dropped substantially, and we've kind of leveled out around 39,000. We'll probably never get back up to that 330,000. But if you look around Ohio, it's all agriculture. It's all urbanized. It's concrete. So there's no place to put 100 hives. We have fewer and fewer big-time commercial beekeepers because there's no place to put all those hives. It's estimated that you need, for every colony of bees, you need 1 to 3 acres of forage. So when you look around Ohio, we have 23,000 colonies right now. Do we have 23,000 acres of forage, wildflowers? Not even close. So there's a problem there. This is our number one pest, the varroa mite. If you look right in the center, you can see a bee that has a deformed wing. Some of the brood is dead or has been chewed out because the varroa mite, it looks like I have a picture of it actually. It's like a tick. It feeds on that developing brood. As it feeds on it, it reduces the health of that bee, obviously, and it injects viruses into the bee. The adult bees are also being fed upon by the mites. So what happens is, like, that bee up in the upper right-hand corner has a mite on her back. So it hitchhikes. It'll come out of one of these cells with the emerging bee. It'll ride around on that bee. She may have another life cycle. Then she'll ride out on that bee to another hive. That bee, drop off at a flower or something like that. It'll drop off in the flower. Another bee will come to that flower. It will climb onto that flower and go back to her hive. It's more of a problem on the male bees, the drones, and on the worker bees. Drones, guys, they don't go back to the same hive. They just go at any hive they want to. So they're carrying the mites as well. So this is our number one problem. The upper left, this is a sort of a side section of brood comb. And you can see all the larvae lined up in there. All those red dots are varroa mites. So that colony, is going to either die or be so stressed from other diseases that it's not going to make it. So not only is that mite chewing on that bee brood, but as once you cut into the tissue of a bee or a larva, all these other bacteria get into it as well. So they get secondary infections. The mite bee on the upper right has one on her back. The one here has one on her head, and then you can see the drone pupa has 2 on there. So they can kill them in several different ways. And I don't want to depress you, but You know, we have brood diseases, we have adult diseases, so we now need to treat for these to try to keep them alive. So mite control, and this is probably, so commercial beekeepers will usually treat their bees 4 to 5 times a year. Hobby beekeepers, because we don't have, 1,000 hives, 2 to 3 times a year. So you're going to average about 40 to 60 times, yeah, that's total for the season, $40 to $60 per hive for 3 treatments in one season. So obviously the more hives you have, the more that cost is going to go up. This is based on just a few hives. If you have 10 or more hives, you usually get a little bit of a discount on buying quantity. If your colony has a brood disease, it's the cheapest thing is to take those colonies infected and burn them and replace them if you can. So a frame with wax foundation is about $13. If it's a serious disease and you have to, start burning them or you have to treat them with an antibiotic, as of last year, we have to get a veterinarian to write a prescription for antibiotic. We can't just go to our local bee supply store and buy antibiotic. We go through a veterinarian. So we're paying for that veterinarian to come to the yard and write a prescription and buy that antibiotic. So I typically tell people to take those infected frames out and burn them and replace them instead of going through that expense. Bee health products, so we have Honeybee Healthy, we have kind of herbs and all kinds of things like that. That's extra. That's about $10 to $25 for a 20-ounce bottle. Feeding them, especially if you're in an area where there's not a lot of natural flowers, we feed them sugar syrup, which is 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 parts, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And you're going to give them, several gallons at a time. Some hungry colonies can drink easily, 10 gallons a season. So that can get expensive. We give them pollen patties. Pollen patties alone aren't enough to give the nutrition that the bees need, but they can supplement, in times when you don't have a lot of things flowering. They're going to be about $5 each, but you're going to have to feed them several times, potentially. Feeding equipment, I'm cheap. I use ball jars. Just put them upside down, and you can buy like a little wooden thing, or you can make your own equipment. You can buy buckets and such like that, or pretty inexpensively. So that part doesn't cost that much. Sugar can actually cost a lot if you start getting a lot of colonies. So sources of bees. You can buy packages, or you can buy a nuke. So a package, it's just what it sounds like. It's a box. It's basically a screen box full of bees. It has a queen and about a pound or 2 pounds worth of bees. So the way they make these packages is that they have a breeder down south who produces queens. They'll cage all these queens that they produce and put them in this package. Then they go to different hives they have and just dump bees into them. So that queen does not belong to those bees. So they have to put her in a cage because otherwise they'd kill her. And they're from the south. So those southern bees, you ship them here to Ohio, they have a huge adjustment. And what we found, unfortunately, is through travel and genetics, those queens usually don't live very long. So we need to requeen them sometime that season. The advantage is it's easy. It's easy to buy a package of bees, and voila, you have bees. Okay, I got to hurry up. Swarms is the easiest way of getting them. You have to consider if you're going to buy queens, they cost quite a bit. There's a queen breeder in Central Ohio who sells them for $1,000 a piece. I'm cheap. I get them from like $25 to $30 a piece. So you can get hygienic bees that are better at controlling the mites. If you do, please make sure that beekeeper has been inspected, because we have people who have terrible bees who should never even keep bees. They should keep stamps. So ask them for that certificate of inspection. That's just a picture of a beautiful swarm there. So before you get bees, also consider your location. So you want to put them, ideally where there's natural flowering plants, wildflowers. You want them to face south or east so they're getting that morning sun. If they can get full sun all day, that's the best that those bees can have. You want them to have some kind of protection from the northwest wind. So if there's no trees, you can actually make like a little barrier out of bales of straw or something like that. If you're going to have them in town, different towns have zoning laws, so you don't want to keep track of. Some neighbors just are terrified of bees, so you have that to worry about. You want to make sure that they have water available at all times. And then you don't want to put your hives right on top of another apiary, because then you're going to be sharing diseases and pests. So yeah, some people are terrified of bees. So I printed this, and I can't go over it because I'm going to run out of time. But if you work with the Pollinator Partnership or even the CTIC people, Pheasants Forever, they all have seed kits. So all of these are all excellent sources of pollen for the season. This is what you want, which is hard to find in Ohio, but this is what you want. Just pictures of bees bringing pollen in. This is what you don't want. This is flying over Northwest Ohio, and I love Northwest Ohio. I go up there several times a year, but there's no flowers there. There's no food source for those bees. So if you have no choice but to put your bees up there, at least try to find a place where there's like a little creek or a runway or gullies or something where there's some flowers. So seed sources, I hope you can all take a picture of that if you need to. There is a lot of information for farmers working with beekeepers and soybean growers working with beekeepers. Time management, it takes quite a bit of time to take care of bees. Read as much as you can before you get the bees so you know what you're getting into. You're going to want to at least check those hives twice in the spring. You're going to be adding boxes as the season goes. You have to watch out for swarming so they don't swarm. I'm so busy, I don't have time to put boxes on as often as I should, so I don't get much honey, which is okay if you don't care. They'll just create more honey down below, which is all right also. You want to check for mites at least once a month and treat if you need to. You're going to be taking the honey off, which is the best part. And then again, October or so, you want to winterize your hives. All kinds of products that you can get from the hives. This is just estimated for extracting. If you want to go full bore, if you're going to have a lot of hives, you can get a larger extractor or an uncapping machine. This is just an average cost just for the processing of the honey. Then this is what you're going to get if you sell this stuff. For honey, it sells like $7 to $10 a pound, retail. If you're going to sell beeswax, $18 a pound, et cetera, et cetera. Queens, again, you can sell them $25 to $500 or more. If you produce nukes to sell, easily sell them for $100 to $150. And then pollination, if you want to make money in beekeeping, it's nuke production and pollination. Because more and more the almond growers need more bees. So they're going to rent those or pay like $150 to $200 per acre. Per hive for pollination. Yeah, so it is a lot of hard work. It's fun. You will get stung. The adage or the expression in beekeeping, there's a lot of money in beekeeping, and it's all ours. So, it is fun. You can make money. We have some beekeepers in Ohio that do very well on beekeeping. But you kind of have to know what you're getting into. So you want to be able to monitor your mite population all season and treat if you have to. Keep your other pest diseases low. Make sure that you can put your bees where they have 1 to 3 acres of forage per colony. You may need to feed them. You may not have to feed them. Read. Call me. I'm more than happy to answer questions. Most of you will have a county bee inspector, which they're also a wealth of knowledge. Please don't believe that stuff on the internet because a lot of them have really bad information. So talk to experienced beekeepers who are doing it right, who are successful. So read. There's 2 great journals, American Beekeeping and Gleanings. Talk to researchers. They're usually happy to help. That's my phone number. So I have 2 more pages after this that are all websites. So if you want to take... Oh, good. All right. So I have time for questions. Yep. So that's my phone number and my email. We have on our website, we have a link to all the clubs, beekeeping clubs in Ohio. So you can join those clubs and call them for information. The Ohio State Bee Lab, they have little videos every month about beekeeping. that are very, very helpful. OSU has some fact sheets that you can, if you can find them on Ohio Line. Ohio State Beekeeping has a lot of information on them too. Wait for you to take a picture. Then, sorry about this, but since I know this is going to be recorded, I figured I could get away with this. These are all sources where you can get information and get new, even grants or information about pollinator plants, or just information about what plants are best for bees. General bee information. I can't emphasize enough the Honeybee Health Coalition. They have excellent information. On their resources page, they have links to all the best university sites that have all the information about the different pests and nutrition, such. Bee Informed has a lot of information that's like a survey taken by beekeepers on what they did and what works and what doesn't work, and then all these other ones. And I'm going to stop so I can ask questions. Okay? Yes?
Other than having someone, rather than renting a hive, for someone, is if you have hives, are there people who will come, that are qualified and experienced to come and maintain the hive?
Yes. So his question is, if you don't want to keep maintain them yourself, you can. There's a lot of people who would love to put bees on your property. So if you want to do that, especially for like CAUV credit, contact your local bee club and say, I have land and I want to have somebody put bees on them. So and you should work out some kind of a deal so you'll get some honey from it. But you can do that. If you're going to have hives who wants to pay somebody to take care of them, ask them what they do for mite control. Because some people refuse to treat for mites, and all they are creating mite bombs for everybody else. Yeah. Yeah, sir.
In corn and soybean country, Northwest Ohio, like you referred to, how significant of a source for foraging are woodlots and pollen from trees and things like that?
So woodlots are a good source of protein and nectar for bees. You have a lot of spring flowers, and actually the bees love the spring flowers in the woodlots. In the middle of the summer, there's not a lot. In the fall time, those trees are pretty well done, so there's not much in the fall. And the bees have had a lot of problems the last 6 years with fall flowers. The goldenrod and aster are really the only sources, and if they're not having a good year, the bees actually eat the honey that they have, because in the fall they still have a ton of brood. They eat the honey that they have, and then they go into the winter starving. So, during the spring and early summer, the woodlots are great, but toward the end of the season, they don't really have much flowering left. Good question. Anything else?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
When the bees are flying around, they're not eating. They're just getting pollen. Do they always eat in the hive?
Okay, so great question. So if the bees are eating the honey that they store in the colony, when they're out flying, they're either collecting pollen, nectar, or water. Yeah, one of the three.
So if you don't have the forage, they can't produce the honey, then they can't eat.
Correct. Yeah. And the honey supers are basically all the extra honey. So what we do, like in the end of August, we take the honey supers off, which forces them to whatever honey and pollen they can bring in, forces them to cram it down below. So then all that honey and pollen is concentrated down below for the winter.
All right, let's give Barb a hand.